What is up, guys? So, I just wanted to make this video because I think a lot of people are throwing Little Durk under the bus. People are acting as if, this case is clear cut, as if the prosecutor's office have a tremendous amount of evidence. But in reality, none of those things are true. The prosecutor's office, in any of their filings so far, have really not presented any, substantial evidence to really tie Little Durk to the murder. I think a lot of people are focusing in on the whole idea that Little Durk, was in LA. He had used a private jet to fly out to LA at the time the murder was being committed, on the same day, even, and that he had told one of the people who ended up playing a fundamental role in the murder not to use any of the credit cards that Lil Durk gave him or anything related to Lil Durk. And so people are saying that him making that statement to this individual connects him to this crime, that he was telling him, hey, don't use my credit card. Although the individual did end up using his credit card, the individual booked hotels for them using his credit card, apparently, or Airbnb. The individual's on camera buying ski masks. I mean, these guys are idiots. I mean, these guys could definitely never get away with murder, you know? However, I think making any connection between that and then saying that, oh, there's snitches on the case, who cares about snitches? A lot of these snitches will be criminals themselves. There'll be people who were involved with the murder and they're trying to throw it on the rich guy to try to get themselves off. I mean, that's the argument that the defense counsel can present regarding any one of these witnesses, because these witnesses are criminals themselves, and many of these witnesses have criminal records. So even if the prosecutor puts on one of these people as a witness, the defense attorneys for Little Durk will immediately say, hey, do you know that this guy is known for committing homicides? Have you seen this guy's criminal record? Do you know that these people have no money in their bank account? Maybe they're trying to throw Little Durk under the bus. They could even show, hey, did you fall out with Little Durk? Was there an argument with Little Durk beforehand? Is that why you're now throwing Little Durk under the bus to get yourself off? And so, I mean, there's a lot of arguments that defense counsel can present to undermine any witness testimony, during trial. So just to say that the feds have a witness does not mean that they have a clear-cut case, because a witness is anyone, and it matters if the jury finds the witness believable. And any defense attorney will stand there and argue that none of these defendants are believable. They're all criminals themselves. They all have criminal records. Maybe they don't have money, maybe something like that. They're trying to throw Little Durk under the bus, get a deal so they can get off, and the prosecutor's office is zealously and eagerly trying to indict the biggest name involved in this situation using attenuated connections that aren't really great. I mean, they don't. Just because Little Durk was in LA does not mean he was involved with the murder. And frankly, if the prosecutor's office had that smoking gun evidence, they would have presented it already. So they don't have, at least as of yet, they've not shown anything that is smoking gun evidence against Little Durk. On top of that, I mean, I'm going to go through what the defense counsel for Little Durk are arguing. They're basically arguing that the prosecution's case against him is built on misinformation and misattributed evidence, particularly concerning his lyrics and their connection to a prior shooting. We've heard about those lyrics. Basically, the prosecutor's office in the grand jury hearing, it's like a trial. There's a grand jury, but you know what there isn't? There is no defense counsel. So it's just the prosecutors and a jury, and they're presenting evidence to the jury to even go to the next step of actually indicting Little Durk. And so what you have here is you don't have defense counsel to argue against it. You don't have anyone to poke holes in it. So it's especially egregious to present evidence that that no one can double check, and to present false evidence in this setting. Do you understand? It's especially egregious because it lets the prosecutors go forward and bring an indictment against an individual, which is just being indicted itself tarnishes your life. Forget Lil Durk. Lil Durk is a wealthy musician, but let's say that's a normal human being, right? Let's say it's just you at home who has a job and you get indicted and you get arrested. That means you can lose your job. It means you can't provide for your family anymore. It means you can lose your home. You can lose your cars. You can lose everything. It destroys your reputation. And especially when it's an indictment for a murder for hire plot, I mean, that means you're going to have to sit in that jail and suffer for allegations that are based on considerable false evidence. You know, it's a misrepresentation of the lyrics, and it's just a fan-made video. So people throwing Lil Durk under the bus and arguing that, oh, none of this really matters because they have so much more evidence, is just not true. The same logic with which, like, you do like speculation on YouTube about who did what is not the logic that you present in a courtroom, because you have to have these strict rules, otherwise it's easy to abuse. And when you have this grand jury system, there's no defense counsel. It's under seal. So even if they call witnesses or whatever or whatnot, everything's under seal. So it's very prone to abuse. What people say is you can get a grand jury indictment for a ham sandwich. A grand jury could indict a ham sandwich because the standard is not that high, you know? And so it's very important. So this is a very good argument that his defense lawyers are presenting, because it's a big deal. You're tarnishing this person's life and presenting a fan-made video on the internet as evidence, which would absolutely create bias in anyone that sees it and believes that it's real, believes that this is something that Lil Durk put out. I mean, this is really horrendous. And so it's not just, oh, it's nothing. Like, I watched that Trap Lord Ross video he did about it for an hour, where he downplays the value and says it's just a mistake. It's an egregious mistake. It's horrendous, because this is a person's freedom. And the grand jury, there's no balance. There's no other side that argues against it. It's just a prosecutor and a jury. And so it's prone to abuse, and then to present false evidence in that setting is just horrendous. And then let's get into the evidence they do have and they've presented. We've already addressed the witnesses. The witnesses, criminals who themselves may have been involved in this crime and now are trying to cover their own ass because they did a sloppy job. And so they're turning snitch to throw Lil Durk under the bus. He's the rich guy. He's the guy with the big name. He's the artist. He's the celebrity. Let's throw him under the bus. Let's get ourselves good deals and let's get the hell out of here. You don't know what was happening before. It could have been that they fell out. You can find and raise and all sorts of issues that would undermine the witness's testimony, and it would ruin that witness in the eyes of the jury. So just to say, oh, they have witnesses or they have snitches or whatever, does not mean that it's a clear-cut case when the snitches are a bunch of criminals themselves. There's plenty of holes you're going to be able to poke in their stories, in their character, all sorts of stuff. So it's an uphill battle both ways in this case. It's an uphill battle for the prosecutor's office, and it's certainly an uphill battle for the defense in this case. And it's of course it's really hard on Lil Durk. You know, he did a little interview with Ack, I guess, and you could hear in his voice. I mean, the guy's going through. He's trying to keep his head up. Apparently, he's become Muslim. He's religious. You know, it's really hard to go through this, but they've not presented anything that's significant enough to show, like, oh, for people to just say, oh yeah, you know, he did it and throw him in there. You know, it's different when you're dealing with a court system where there's strict rules of procedure and many other rules that have to be followed, of evidence of all sorts. And all that is going to be argued for a very long time before Dirk even ever goes to trial. I mean, motion hearing, discovery, there's a long process before Lil Durk even gets to trial. And so things get stripped away, new evidence comes to light, certain witnesses become unreliable. It's an entire process, and it certainly takes a long time, but it's much easier for Little Dirk to fight it if he's out on the streets. You know, that's why it's very important for him to get out on the streets, because it's much easier to fight, it's much easier to be involved, it's much easier to be on top of it than it would be of him being in jail trying to work with his lawyers to fight this case. So, people just presenting it as like a clear cut thing that he's just done, and that the prosecutor's office probably have such a strong case, and they always throw out that whole, it's the U.S. Assistant U.S. attorneys, the U.S. Attorney's office. They always present those numbers. Oh, there's a 90 something percent conviction rate or whatever. Man, those people don't have Lil Durk's lawyers, Most people don't have Lil Durk's lawyers. A lot of people settle, stuff like that. So, make deals, plead guilty, non-contend, or whatever. And so, so there's a lot to it, man. I just wanted to make this video to show that, look, you don't have that strong of a case. Otherwise, it's not even worth hiring these expensive lawyers and doing all of this. They can't make magic happen. But they can look at the evidence, they can investigate, they can hire investigators, they can look at how they collected evidence, they can certainly get information about all sorts of things that went on, and they can argue against it and poke holes in it, and there's going to be plenty of holes to poke. First of all, you got witnesses who are all criminals, you got this attenuated connection between him and this credit card and these individuals, and then, all the rest of that, and then you have a literal grand jury indictment that is partially but significantly based off of a false video that would certainly bias any jury. The determination as to whether evidence is presented in court is usually based on its probative value versus its probative versus prejudicial value. So how probable, like how useful is it to prove whatever you're trying to prove versus how prejudicial is it? And in this case, presenting that kind of evidence, although those evidence rules don't apply to a grand jury proceeding, in this case, presenting that kind of evidence is extremely prejudicial. And it certainly prejudices this jury. Although the standard isn't high for a grand jury indictment, it absolutely prejudices this jury, man. And so that's why there's a lot of holes to poke, and that's a lawyer's job. And I'm giving you guys a taste of what that's like. You take this case, you see this information, and you find the holes, man. It's a war. You're gonna fight and fight and fight and fight. And sadly, Lil Durk is going to fight, even if these are fake allegations. And that's why the standards have to be met and kept, and why it's so important that you keep these standards, because it makes it too easy for the prosecutor's office to become abusive, to bring these allegations against people, to get these indictments, these grand jury indictments, to indict these people, to arrest these people, and to destroy their entire lives when they do so. Even if they end up being innocent, it costs them years in prison. It costs them hardship to them and their families and all the rest of it. So it's not easy. You see a lot of these cases, the ones that are famous are rich characters who can afford it. A person who has a job and just lost it. A month you don't show up to work. Could you imagine? They lost their job. They lost their job. What follows? They lose their home. They lose their car. They lose their life, and it brings destruction to their families. And so it's incredibly important that the police presented this false evidence, basically, And I just wanted to present that argument, which I haven't heard presented. And I want to let me know what you guys think. I hope you guys found this useful. Not getting a lot of views right now, but whatever, we keep it pushing. Peace.